In terms of fundraising opportunity, well, this is more to do with the vertical slump sale, where you push your business into a subsidiary. You could actually invite investors into that subsidiary because you have a focused business, whereas an investor is not interested in your hodgepodge businesses. He can actually come and invest in that company. Accelerated tax shelter, I just discussed, through the purchase price allocation you could achieve that. And capital structuring, especially this is quite prevalent where you do a horizontal demerger. You could actually infuse debt into the company, and again that helps to reduce your effective tax rate. So those are some of the advantages. On a downward side, of late what we've seen is there's a strong shareholder lobby which kind of seems to believe that most of the slum sales are done to avoid attracting the provisions of the SEBI takeover code. I think we've read maybe a couple of weeks back, maybe 3 weeks back, some of the places where shareholders have actually kind of objected to some kind of business transfer on the guise that the intent was to actually avoid an open offer by the acquirer company. From a tax perspective, if you were to transfer the business at full value, there is again a tax cost to the seller. So therefore, to that extent, it is not tax neutral. In a demerger, we have the ability to go retrospective for the business or from an appointed date. So under demerger, we have a concept of appointed date where you actually transfer a business from a retrospective date. So for example, as Manish mentioned, in his case, whilst they were planning for the whole exercise somewhere in May or June of 2009, they had the ability to go back to April 2009 and do the demerger or the merger, as the case may be, through a code-approved scheme. Whereas in cases of business transfer, you don't have that flexibility, largely because you would have to do it from a prospective appointed date. And you don't get any automatic listing as you get in the case of a demerger. So why demerger, why slum sales? So what we've done is we've tried to capture some case studies here and relate it to real life examples where people have gone ahead and announced demergers, slum sales, and we've tried to see whether really has it been value accretive, has it unlocked value from a shareholder perspective or from a business perspective, or really they have been a drag post the unlocking, post the demerger or the slum sale. So the first point, focusing on core competencies, as I just mentioned, was the case of Bajaj Group. Bajaj Group, under the flagship Bajaj Auto, they were actually into 3 or 4 businesses. They were into the insurance business, which is on the right-hand side box, which is the JV with Allianz Global. They were into the 2-wheelers and the 3-wheelers business, which was residing in Bajaj Auto. And they had the NBFC wing, which was essentially Bajaj Auto Finance. Now, an interesting thing to be looked here is that the promoter's stake is essentially 28% odd in Bajaj Auto, whereas the public stake is almost around 70% in Bajaj Auto. Each of the brothers. So, for example, Sanjeev Bajaj and Rajiv Bajaj, they were focusing on each of the businesses. They demerged the 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers business into one entity, and they demerged the rest of the businesses, which is essentially your financial services, your insurance fees, into another listed entity. So if you were to look at the resultant structure, Bajaj Auto Limited, which is the earlier erstwhile Bajaj Holdings, that is the company which would house 2-wheelers and the 3-wheelers business. And as a part of the demerger, there was a cash which was transferred to Bajaj Auto. On the right-hand side, you would see Bajaj Finserv, which is the holding, which is the NBFC or the financial services company, which is into wind power, which is into auto financing and consumer durable financing. And you see the holding company at the top, which is Bajaj Holding and Investment, which was also in Bajaj Auto. Now, from a promoter control perspective, if you were to look at this, the structure, while they would still continue to be 28%, but from a control perspective, they have achieved a larger control. Now, in terms of the impact on the market cap of Bajaj as a whole, so if you were to do some analysis, what we tried plotting was to see what was the price of the combined market cap on the last day of the trading, and what was the market cap post demerger, and what is the market cap today. The market cap on the last day of the trading was around 21,000 crores, and post the demerger, when 3 independent businesses were listed, the combined market cap was almost, I think, 20% higher. It was almost something like 29,000 crores. So really, yes, it in a way had implication on the shareholder book value, and it was on a positive side that there was an accretion to the shareholder value. And if you were to look at the market cap of all these three entities today, it's actually almost 56,000 crores from 22 or 29,000 crores at that point. So it's almost doubled in the last 3 years. I think one of the fundamental points which Manish also highlighted in his presentation was really the underlying business has also supported the whole restructuring. So if you were to look at the numbers of Bajaj Auto only, Bajaj Auto has actually grown from a PAT of around 650 crores in 2009, which was the first year post-split. It has actually gone up to 3,300 crores in 2011. So there's actually been a five-fold rise in the profitability of Bajaj Auto post the restructuring. So not necessarily that it was because of the restructuring, but the business has actually supported the restructuring as well. So that was more from a perspective that the management wanted to focus on core competencies, and that's when they did this whole restructuring and demerger and unlock the value from a shareholder perspective. But just going back, I mean, another case which I have covered is from a fundraising perspective. So a company with a hodgepodge business would actually was wanting to raise funds for one of its premium business where the EBITDA margins etc. were very good, but the value wasn't getting captured, and the investors were not willing to come in a consolidated entity for obvious reasons. So this restructuring essentially is to do with. So this restructuring is essentially to do with investor entry. So if you were to look at Escobar Nationwide, it was into the branded of the luxury segment, which was the Reed and Taylor, and they had the other businesses, which was the home textiles and other consumer textiles, which is the popular Escobar brand and the Belmont brand and all of that. Now Reed and Taylor was essentially a luxury brand which commanded significant premium and had significant EBITDA margins compared to the rest of the businesses. And stake for 900 crores. And they diluted a 26% equity for this. So if you were to look at from a market cap impact perspective, the market cap of SKL was around 3,000 crore at that point in time when this announcement happened. But if you were to just look at it, the underlying value of Reed and Taylor post money, after the money infusion was done, the value of Reed and Taylor itself was 3,500 crores, going by the investment made by GIC, which was around 900 crores. So if you were to just make it 4 times of that, it's almost around 3,600